Behind every game you play, there are minds quietly building the world you step into. At Mindstorm Studios, games don't just begin with graphics or sound. They begin with ideas, lines of code, and the people who bring them to life, turning imagination into systems and systems into experiences players can feel. My name is Umair Mehmood. I am Director of Engineering at Mindstorm Studios. I've been with the company for past 7 years. So my first interaction with the video games per se was in I think 1995 or 96 when I got my first Game Boy. So मैंने अपने piggy bank में I think I saved 90 rupees and then my big brother उसने 60 rupees उसने add up किया and then he bought me Game Boy. So that was my first interaction with the video games. When I joined university, at that time Flash was quite a big thing. So Miniclip was very famous. At that time I started learning Flash because I was very excited about generally making games. Unfortunately, iPhone and Android both decided to cut off Flash because of the security vulnerabilities. I also then left Flash and then started my iPhone and native Android development career. At that point, I joined Montage. At Montage, I was working on application development and then game development as well. I did a bit of Coco Studio at that time. Then Unity came in. I switched to 𝙈𝙚𝙚𝙀 because 𝙈𝙚𝙚 was willing to switch to Unity. At that time, I met 𝙈𝙚𝙚𝙀 and he told me about Mindstorm doing a partnership with Line Studios for hyper casual game development and publishing. That seemed like an interesting opportunity. I decided to come on board onto Mindstorm's new venture with the Line Studios. So when I joined Mindstorm Studios, there was a game called Mr. Bullet. It was a game made by Line Studios, but Mindstorm was actively managing the live op support for that game. Mindstorm at that time had only Unity developers in the whole team. There was no specifically tooling team. There was no backend team. So I started developing the tooling team and then the tooling and the automation pipelines as well. We had a success with our hybrid casual game, which was Tile Garden. So the prototype was success. Initial numbers were looking good, but the team had only 2 developers and they needed actually a lead to grow the team and grow the whole product. So I joined Tile Garden's team, worked on Tile Garden for roughly 2 years. Once that game was in its peak scale, then we needed more games to generate more revenue. So we started prototyping in. 𝙈𝙚𝙝𝗢𝗓𝗧 came in as a success from the prototype testing pipeline, and then we started developing the whole product. So 𝙈𝙚𝙝𝗢𝗓 has a dedicated AI level generation pipeline built in that creates levels, that test level, and that evaluates every level that is built. It's a whole pipeline on modern AI systems. So when I started, there was only C++. Flash was the first one that kind of emerged as a game engine. It was not a game engine, but emerged as a game engine because it was very lightweight. Coco Studio emerged for almost all mobile games. Then came Unity. Then Unity just took over the whole mobile gaming space. And now with the agentic development, I think we are going back into engine agnostic domain where the engine might not matter anymore because AI is doing most of the heavy lifting. So I like to think that these are the good old times at the moment. If you are a builder these days, so it's a heaven, it's a paradise because all the boring bits of building software, they are gone. It literally takes a single command or a single prompt to any agent और वो आपका पूरा project जो है वो setup कर देगा. I have seen myself back जहाँ पे मैं दोबारा से नाइटर लगा रहा हूँ for no reason being कि कोई rush नहीं है मुझे, but the problem is कि वो कोई pause नहीं आ रहा है. You are enjoying it so much. So the industry I think is changing, or all the software that was written by humans for humans, now it's changing. It's written by agents for agents actually. RNG games or real money games are usually multiplayer games. For an RNG game, you need to be fluent in your backend, in your multiplayer programming, all those multiplayer systems as well. And then it adds added complexity that you need to cover up things like security as well, and the real money transactions where it's not just an in-app, it's actually a deposit, and then that deposit would be someday withdrawal as well. But in hybrid casual games, the life cycle of the game is pretty simple because you have a prototype. The prototype needs to be quick, it's fast, but the time matters. The next thing is the lifetime or the development life cycle of these two, because hyper casual is like maximum 1 month to 2 months. Hybrid casual is 6 months to a year maybe in development. But RMG is a lifestyle. It generally lasts more than 5 years. If it's less than 5 years, then the game was definitely not a hit or not profitable. So if it's a good profitable game, it will definitely last more than 5 years. That means that the developer or the whole team would have to stick with the same code base, with the same feature set for more than 5 years, maybe a decade even. Hybrid casual, it's just honestly at Mindstorm Studios, we are starting a new game every month. So the new people can easily come on board into a prototyping cycle or into a live ops cycle. So it's either way, it's pretty simple. So we are a 150-man team at the moment, and half of them are engineers. So problem with this big size of a team is the adoption of new tech. I think the problems that then arises for all the new people is that for agents and for this natural language coding, so to say, it's pretty new. So everybody has their own style of talking. Everybody has their own style of interacting with their agents. They have different workflows. That workflow may or may not be the same. So how do you hire these new people or these experienced people from the industry, because they don't follow the same architectural patterns and principles that we follow. The hiring problem was that we started this new summer program. So we onboard 6 to 10 people each year from university. We onboard them, we train them. They are then sprinkled into different teams. One of the problems is communication, and everything needs to be in written communication. Developers usually shy away from those formal written communication notes. Right now, although that Agentic is not in place across the studio, but we still enforce people to share their meeting minutes, their spec of how they are going to break down different tasks. They are doing this written communication more frequently so that they're actually ready to give those prompts to the agents as well. I have this love and hate relationship with performance optimization, primarily because the results, they are not binary. Every year there are these new phone devices that you need to support. There are these older devices which are getting older and older, but generally in tier 2, tier 3 countries, those devices are still in abundance and we still have to support them. The major success was Super Saloon in 2019-20. It was a hyper casual game. After that, we transitioned more into hybrid casual. So the two games that we worked on were Tile Garden and Matchball. We worked roughly 2 years, 2.5 years on these two games. With 𝙈𝙚𝙚𝙀, we were able to reproduce all of that only in 6 months, I would say. Point out, last year, it took only, I think, 2 months to ship everything. Now with the success of Point Out, we know that 𝙈𝙚𝙀 was not just a fluke. All these three games are like very different, but the understanding of how to run a hybrid casual game is still the same. Keep things simple. I believe more in the system design these days rather than the elaborated core architecture, so to say. Whenever you add a new module, whenever you add a new feature, it needs to interact with another features within the game. What we do is we keep code simple, and we have very aggressive review cycles. Every PR, every code, every line, every class needs to be reviewed by somebody. First of all, we have this flattish kind of hierarchy. You are always reporting to a manager, but that manager or that lead is more of a mentor. And we have a lot of technical leads and principal game devs who are 10 plus years of experience in game dev. The common questions that I ask usually is, how did you prepare for this interview? Other question that I usually ask is, okay, what's your strongest suit? What's your strongest area? Whatever you do, you cannot be better than an AI model. The only important thing at this point for any developer is their problem solving, their debugging, and then their system design. All the workflows that was valid last year, unfortunately, are not valid this year. So universities, the academia, they need to understand that. Secondly, there is a new term floating within software engineering circle. It's called native AI engineer. They use agents to make different products rather than directly coding. It's reviewed by the engineer. So the system design is still in the engineer's code, but the coding part is in the agent's bucket. And the academia needs to understand this part, and then all the FYPs, they need to be shaped accordingly as well. They need to teach themselves first and then to the students what is the right way of using AI and agentic. So one thing that I've seen people doing when they go into lead engineering or engineering manager role, they let go of their original engineering roots that they began their career with. So the technical vertical that they have is way more important than anything else, and that technical vertical needs to be thick enough to hold the T shape or the T shape career that they were trying to build up, because that's the vertical aspect is your technical knowledge, how good are you in a specific domain, and then your horizontal growth is basically other skills like your mentoring, leadership, communication, and all the other soft skills that matter. So if you let go of that vertical, then you will be just floating in the air. One is KISS, keep it super simple, or keep it stupid simple, I think. And then the second one is Yagni, you ain't gonna need it. So I think, so what this does is keeps the code, keeps everything simple enough, and then avoids over engineering at any point. So you code stay simple, less breaking points and less things to worry about. You need to give them just the direction, fresh cats go to get to the problem themselves rather than exactly बता दें कि यार अच्छा जा जाके ये कर ले, ठीक है. Let them make mistakes, because अगर वो खुद गलती करेंगे then they will know कि अच्छा इसके क्या ripples थे, क्या repercussions थे. Review cycle is more important. Let them do whatever they want to do, however they want to tackle some problem, solve some issue that they are working on, and then review their code afterwards, that how they approach their problem, and then you can give feedback on their approach rather than the code itself, because कोड के ऊपर ट्रॉफी नहीं मिलने वाली किसी को. इट्स द ग्रोथ इज ऑन हाउ दे आर थिंकिंग एंड हाउ देयर माइंडसेट इज इवॉल्विंग ओवर टाइम.